Hello and welcome to No Rest for the Weekend, where we go behind the scenes and talk to the creators of independent entertainment. I'm Jason Godbey, and with me in the Rabbit Hole studio today, she is an accomplished actor and producer. She's here to talk about her current project, which is Adulting with Jane. Miss Jenny Paul. Welcome, Jenny.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
I should say welcome back to the cast, because you were on one of the early seasons of the show, one of the guinea pig seasons, as I like to refer to it. So if you want to know more about Jenny herself, check out episode 201 of the cast. But we're going to talk more about the project that you're here to talk about, which is coming out, Adulting with Jane. So without further ado, give me like the log line, the Hollywood log line for the show.
Adulting with Jane is a shoppable DIY comedy series about a millennial, Jane, who may or may not have certain adulting skills, like sewing a button, changing a tire, how to help a friend with a panic attack, all sorts of stuff. And the show basically exists to demystify these individual things, but also to be a sitcom in and of itself. So yeah, each episode has a different expert influencer that comes to teach Jane how to do something that could help her in her real life.
With this character, who is she's a generation, a millennial generation character?
I would say millennial, maybe slipping into Gen Z, but
right.
By and large millennial.
And for Gen Xers like myself, kind of explain the whole, like how she fits into the whole scenario of adulting and what that concept is.
So basically, I would say Jane is a pretty average millennial as far as things go. Most millennials, unlike Gen Xers and baby boomers and up, the great generation, are very good at taking care of themselves in certain ways, whether it be getting to their job on time or being on top of their fashion or their design or their relationships, but they're not necessarily good at the things that, you know, some of our parents and the people just older than us learned pretty young in life, like sewing, changing tires. These are things that were kind of normal and natural for people to learn, and somehow our generation missed some of that. Now, I have a lot of theories on why that might be, but
posit one for us.
Posit one. Well, for
throw
me,
one out there.
For example, for me, is my parents were both doctors, and I actually wanted to learn how to sew, and I also my dad spoke Spanish. I wanted to learn Spanish. My dad played the piano. And I think my parents, when I asked them to teach me those different things, were like, they kind of suck. You know, my dad had to learn Spanish. He had to learn piano. My mom had to learn to sew. So they were kind of like, we don't really want to teach you. If you want to go learn from somebody that really knows what they're doing. So in my case, some of the stuff I did learn anyway, because you have to, doing laundry. I actually do know how to sew a button. On the flip side of things, some of the stuff I didn't learn because my parents really didn't like learning it, and they felt forced to do it, so they didn't really want to share that burden with me. So then that leaves me, 21, 22, without a few of the home ec steps that most people get. We also, if I remember correctly, we had home ec in 7th grade, but they canceled the program in 9th, so I'm kind of on the cusp of people that did get a little bit of home ec, but then it kind of went out the window after I got to school.
When I was a kid, they called it wasn't home economics, they called it something like home and careers, because I was like the first generation when they tried, because back in the old days, like the baby boomer generation, if you were a guy, you took shop, if you were a gal, you took home ec. And when I came along, they were trying to be a little bit more progressive, so they made everybody take both.
Yep.
So you had to take home and careers, and you also had to take something called technology, which was just shop, but they didn't call it good. But shop, I guess, wasn't a cool term, so they called it technology. Now, this character is she a real person, or is she sort of a composite, your typical millennial type? Like, how would you describe her as a person?
I think she is a real person. I mean, interestingly enough, I think she kind of represents the person that would be my Jenny's best friend. So I'm somebody who kind of takes a lot of pride in doing adulty type things and being responsible for myself and dealing with all these things. And when I need something, I'll Google it and I'll just figure it out. I'll figure out what I need.
Producing.
right, producing. But I think on the flip side of that, there are a lot of people that have, a high 5-figure, early 6-figure job that they're either in law, they're in fashion, they're in PR, they're in social media. There are lots of new kinds of careers where where you can be a fully functional adult and never have to have done a lot of these things, especially if you live in a big city like New York. So I think there are a lot of Janes out there. I think they're running PR firms, and I think they're running fashion design marketing, and they're doing that sort of thing, and they don't have necessarily enough time to be the ones sewing their own thing or doing their own thing. If they're in fashion, I sure hope they can sew that button. But,
right.
That's sort of the thought there.
I also think this goes back to, the difference in parenting, the difference in rearing, because a lot of the times that menial stuff was taught at home or taught at school. And now, schools are sort of treated as these, it's basically just like career school. Like you're taught a certain discipline that you're supposed to go into when you get older, when you graduate, but you're not taught life skills. You're not taught things about life. And, we need that too. That's part of growing up. And you get that from your teachers. So like these career-minded people who can be very successful can also be completely dysfunctional in their personal life and not know how to do certain things, including know about other people.
Right.
And I think it's also technology as well. There's a lot of things that technology has kind of taken over for us. But there's certain things that, unless you own a robot, they can't change your own tire for you, and they can't do certain things for you. I mean, what are we going to do when we have self-driving cars and then nobody knows how to drive anymore, and then your self-driving car breaks down and somebody's got to drive the bloody thing? So I think it's an interesting concept, and I think it at its heart, it's got very good intentions. It sounds like it's a very well-intended type series. The thing that scares me is the fact that we might need it.
We might now.
Now, you say it's a shoppable series. Now, how did that come about? Because you had the idea, right? And then you brought it to brands to partner with. Like, how did that whole thing come about?
So back when we did our interview in season 2, as it were, it wasn't going to be a shoppable video. Basically, I've been in the indie content universe for a good 5 or 6 years now. I like to think of myself at kind of the forefront of it, but it's indie, so everybody's got their own thing, their own definition, their own audiences.
Hence this show.
But I do know that one of the major, if not the major issue that indie content has as a genre, if you want to call it that, is that there's no money for it. There's no money anywhere. People get distributions in, big multi-channel networks. They get distributions online. They get distributions in OTT platforms such as Netflix, Hulu, Amazon. But there's still no money in it. And production, on the flip side of things, costs a lot of money to happen. Some less than others, but generally speaking, they're very expensive to produce. And it takes a village. It's 40 people per project minimum. So basically, I've been kind of grappling with this idea. I produced a series 5 or 6 years ago that was incredibly successful for what it was. It was called That Reminds Me. And it was a narrative about a family and sitcom, but it didn't make any money. It made, little bits here, little bits there. And I thought to myself, there's got to be some way to monetize this stuff so that people are getting the content they want, but it's also not, cost prohibitive. It's not, basically setting yourself up for failure as a business person or an entrepreneur. So I've been looking for a successful way to monetize one of these things for God knows how many years. And this is one of the projects that I had, in development when I learned about a technology that was kind of up and coming that allowed you to hotspot videos within the content and allow things you can click through things. YouTube has this to a degree, but they're very limited in what they allow you to do with it. And so I figured that one of these series one project would be a good fit for something that had an interactive element. And this, to me, struck the chord as the one. So as soon as the tech itself, which was kind of behind the curve in terms of usability and too much buffering, all of that stuff, we basically sat on the tech until it was ready, in our opinion, and then we greenlit the project.
You bring up some interesting stuff here because a lot of the people out there, a lot of people watching this show right now, they're indie content creators, they're filmmakers, and there's no bloody money in it. There's no way to get the hardest thing to do is get something financed. So you have the quandary of like, I want to get this thing financed, but I want to keep creative control over it, or I want it to have some creative integrity. But the first thing I have to do to get financing is sell out to a corporation or get an investor who's, maybe they're an active investor and they're telling me what to do. And now I'm in this whole quandary of I want to get this thing made, but it's not mine anymore. Like there's this whole, argument that happens with just about everything. And then if you do say, you know what, screw it, I'm just going to make it myself.
Yeah.
Now you've got okay, how do we get this done? Because there's no money, and, how do we get people to either work for free or work for food or so you're doing all of this stuff, and you wind up working so hard just to work, just to make something. And it also goes to the problem of the people now have been trained, audiences have been trained to get their content for free. We have this free information age and everything's on the internet, but somebody's got to pay for it somehow because it costs money to make. Yep. So like with this, how are you able to kind of navigate those waters and because you have several brands on board for this. Talk about that a little bit. Like, who are your partners in this thing?
We have a fair number of partners because, once again, it takes a village. And when you're starting something up, nobody wants to come in big. But everybody's willing to kind of take a little chance here and there. And so we kind of spent a long time cultivating sponsorships. We have a handful of different sponsors. We have a tire sponsor for the How to Change a Tire episode. We have Project Repat is a company, a really, really quality company actually, that makes quilts out of your old T-shirts.
Okay.
And so we feature that in the sort of tidying up and making space in your apartment.
It's also a little
episode.
Bit renewable, reusable kind of thing, which is cool.
They're a really cool company too. They basically give American jobs to people that need them in a certain amount of, charity donations. They have a very cool baseline for their business.
That's nice.
And then we have the Actual Tech is a partner. They are trying to break into the American market and get this to be a thing as well. They're called Wire Wax, and they weren't the original tech that we were using. The original tech, as far as we know, went belly up, which was really interesting. So when we found out,
so you started out with one company, and then
we started out with a company that the only one we'd ever heard of having done this, and then we were kind of ready to go, and they weren't able to do it. So we went, okay, let's figure out who else is out there, and we actually found two companies, and the one that we liked the best in terms of its functionality was Wire Wax, and then we met with them in person here. They have a New York branch, and we loved them. They were wonderful, and we went, okay. So we're formally partners with them as well. We have affiliate partnerships with Masterclass, which is a very similar type of thing, except
it's a great
much more
program.
in detail.
Yeah.
Great program. Nerd Wallet is another one. It's a lot of financial advice, information, that sort of thing.
The fact that you were able to secure these, that's a job in and of itself.
Oh, that's the job.
Now, were you doing this stuff on your own? Did you have partners producing partners that were helping you out with this?
3 producing partners. One of them is
That's
by
good.
and large responsible for the sponsorship element, although to the point where we were all in it together. Until it became a separate job. So myself, Elvin Reutman, who is my co-executive producer, has been by and large in it with me. And then the other 2 major producers are Jonathan Paul and Samantha Saltzman.
What were some of like the lessons that you learned doing that? And like, can you give us like a little do and don't list, or like,
yeah, sure.
Like, can you because I think it's something people want to do, but I think it's something people don't know about,
I think the biggest thing is learn to love your product and learn to sell the shit out of it, because it's at first you're like, okay, why should they be spending money on me? What do I have to offer? And then when it comes down to it, in reality, especially at a low price point, which is where we still are because we're newish, this is no skin off most companies' noses. So it's just a matter of if you fit their branding or not. So if you guys are shooting for the same audience and there's benefit to be had from their audience to yours, your audience to theirs, then there's no reason, they may still say no, but there's no reason that you have any disadvantage in asking.
Yeah, and I think it's probably in this case, it's not really about the money.
Mm-hmm.
It's about is it a worthwhile investment for them in terms of, so like I hate to say this, but like your first season is very crucial because you have these people partnering with you. So it's like if you're a success out the gate, you'll have a second season.
Yep.
But it's something to get greenlit this way because it means that your concept was strong enough and your creativity was enough that you got people who were essentially not creative to get on board with what you're doing, and so you're able to, like, it's like when you pitch any executive or you pitch, a network or whatever, if you can say, like, now, if you get this thing going and the product's quality and the show is quality, now if you want to take this to a higher network, if you want to get this, somebody else to pay you for this, you can say, hey, listen, I've already got all these other brands on board, and they like that, because somebody else was, like you said, they're not willing to come in big at first, but they'll throw some chips in there. They'll throw you a few shekels, and then next thing you know, you like. It's a building process.
Right.
That's probably the thing that people don't realize too. It's not like just like, oh, here's Target or whatever, and they're just going to give you a ton of money to do this. No, it's like we got to get this one and that one and this one and that one, and then we'll make enough. It's like that quilt making company.
Right.
You get enough old T-shirts and you can make
yes,
one.
exactly.
So that's great though. I think that's and patience, I would imagine. Yeah, because it took you. From like inception to the point where you're like, we're going to go into production. How long is that process for you?
We shot our first tester episode in April of this year.
Okay, so about a year between the time you started, you were able to talk about it, and the time that you were able to come around.
It was in the pile for a lot longer than that.
Well, in this case too, it was a little bit not to compare you, but like it's like James Cameron wanting to make Avatar. He couldn't make that movie until they could do that because the technology wasn't there.
Yeah.
But I think this is kind of the wave of the future. Nobody wants to watch commercials. I pay extra on some of my streaming channels, so I have to watch commercials. So how do you get it in there? How do you And I've seen it happening. Subtly, I'll use that in finger quotes, subtly in certain programs of product. Like, okay, does Tony Stark really need to make the long drive up the driveway to Avengers headquarters in the Audi that gets a money shot when it pulls into it's,
maybe not. Who knows?
Is that Joe and Anthony Russo going, no, I really want to show the way Tony drives, or is it and also he's like a gazillionaire. Would he have an Audi? Wouldn't he have like a Maserati or a Ferrari or But a lot of those cars in the Marvel movies are Audis. So, this is the way it is, kids. And if you want to make the content, you got to pay for it somehow. But I think that's great. I think all that stuff it shows how good you are as a business person and, how savvy you were to be able to say, hey, come on board with this. You guys are, you're looking at distribution now you're doing VOD?
We're doing internet-based. So the tech is really built out for an internet kind of capacity because it's got all these hotspots the same way YouTube would, click to the next thing. But the VOD platforms, Roku, Chromecast, Fire Stick, Apple TV, they all are conducive to this type of thing. Not necessarily to the direct clicking to shop because it gets cumbersome. Anytime you try to buy something through a smart TV, you're like, 4.
Yeah. You got to scroll
7,
through the menu
and
thing.
It's like, we're done. Like, getting out of my chair to get that credit card is enough to not have me do that.
Right.
But we're working on having that. We're also going to be implementing a QR code system if people really want to do that through the television.
Like a scan type thing.
Right. So it scans you straight to the buying function. And if you really want to do that, my assumption is that people will, if they're going to watch it on TV, they're just going to watch it. But maybe a little bit we'll get, and then internet, mobile. Basically, it's kind of anything that's open source that's not behind a paywall because it's theoretically being paid for by advertisers. So there's no reason for the viewers to need to pay for that.
Right. Now, the stuff that you're talking about with the Apple TV and the Rokus, now I watch most of my internet through my Apple TV. So I've got that little thin, we call it the score bar remote because it's so, and it's got like 4 buttons on it. It's very hard to manage anything.
Yeah.
And then when you get kicked out of Netflix, you got to go through 100 things just to type it.
That's right.
They're going to fix that.
They're going to have to.
I feel like that's something that's going to be, press play or press this to get, press the circle to get this whatever.
They're going to have to keep up.
That functionality is going to happen. It's just not right now.
Yep.
So I feel like this is all future-proof in a way because the technology is going to have to get there. Especially, now Apple's developing their own content, so they're going to want to do stuff like this. And, not everybody watches Netflix on their laptop, so they're going to want to, all of this kind of thing is going to happen where, when Tony Stark does pull up in the Audi and you're watching it on Disney Plus, now all you have to do is click on the, hit, it'll be a little circle and
That's this.
And hopefully there will be something where you could turn that off.
Oh, there is. There is.
So that if you don't want that. Yeah. I find I actually get less commercials on my Apple TV. Because like with YouTube, they'll put one in the middle, but when I watch it through Apple TV, I usually just get the one in the beginning. Sometimes one at the end, which nobody watches the one at the end. But so I think all that stuff is it's the wave of the future, and it's going to be and it's so much better than having what I've seen is where you have a character in the show shill for the product in the show, and it's just it's
a lot.
And
it's a lot. I have trouble with that.
Your eyes roll back in your head so fast, and you just sit there cringing like, oh my god, why is Kira Sedgwick plugging an iPad?
To me, the integration is the key here. It's I could talk about the advertising part of this all day, every day, because I think it's the most interesting. Because we have this problem of an over influx of content, and this other problem of these advertisers that are used to being able to put money into that content that have nowhere to put it anymore.
Right, because nobody wants to watch.
Watches commercials.
Yeah, nobody watches commercials.
So they need another way to reach back out to their audiences that isn't the way that they're accustomed to doing it. So I think this is a great bridge gap. That being said, I think that integration into the process is so much more important than people give it credit for. I think Audi would be best suited to not do a click-through because nobody's going to buy a car through their computer.
Right.
That being said, if it was a smaller item, say for instance like a gadget that you only need to buy once, like a specialty razor or in our case it's a car jack, something that you're going to buy one time and you're going to throw it in your trunk and that's going to be the end of it. That's just something that somebody might want to see through.
It's something you don't have to test drive.
Exactly. Like nobody's going to, maybe clothing or something, but nobody's going to buy an Audi that way. So it's not in Audi's best interest to break up the storytelling in any kind of way that way.
You're integrated in this process because this is what your show is about. So there is a story reason for these things to be there. It's not just like, look, I literally watched an episode of a show where this guy was talking about his new Samsung tablet, and it was just so forced, and you just felt like, the red mark I had on my forehead from smacking it while I was watching this thing was like, you just kind of like, come on, man. Like, and, it's like respected actors just stumbling all over themselves to spout, corporate written dialogue.
Right, to show the Pepsi can in the right direction.
Yeah,
I saw one of those this week. I was like, oh, Pepsi.
Yeah, so, you're going to, to me, if you're going to do it, you have to do it either very subtly or you have to make fun of the fact that you're doing it. Which, before, I'm going to wrap up in a minute here, but, how would you explain that? How would you describe the tone of the show? Because you don't want to talk down to people.
Yeah.
And it is a comedy series. So how do you do that without making fun of them?
I think we're doing a little... we never make fun of a product because that's just not.
No, your
show.
audience.
But the audience, Jane is likable, maybe too much so. So I think it's just more of like and less of like we're making fun of Jane. And we've done a lot of like deep script writing and development to make sure that Jane isn't dumb, because Jane isn't dumb. So when we get into these things, it's more of like she's already Googling something because she's not really sure. And then all of a sudden the magical influencer pops in and is like, the making fun that we do, here's a good for instance, the making fun that we do is our influencer intercepts Jane as she decides she's going to H&M to buy a new shirt because the button fell off. Okay, so there's comedy in that because like the nonsense to especially older generations, but just to anybody.
No, that sounds like something people do.
Yeah, it's something people do. It's okay. You're waiting for a business meeting at a Starbucks or in a coffee shop, and you lose a button, and there's nothing you can do about it right now. You're not going to Dwayne Reed for a needle and thread and finding a bathroom. You're going to H&M. Because that shirt's only going to cost you $10.
Yeah.
So there is some truth to that, but there's a lot of humor in that too. It's like, wait, what's she doing? And then the influencer gets to say, "Whoa, hold up! Like you don't have to do any of that. You can just take a needle and thread, and there's usually an extra button that most people don't even realize is there in the cuff of the shirt.
Right.
That type of thing. So she, one of the episodes is the cleaning up, and her boyfriend needs some extra space so that he can leave his stuff there. She doesn't have any, so she goes to buy a new dresser, and then they're like, "What? That's nonsense," So we make fun of it. It's tongue in cheek about sort of millennial antics, as it were, but she's not stupid. She's solving the problem. She's just solving the problem in a way that a millennial with no time and a little bit of extra income
right, and hence the landfills pile up. So
exactly.
Hopefully, enough people see this. It'll be good for the planet.
Yeah,
too.
Really.
But
it'd be great for the planet.
It's definitely a thing. It's definitely part of the culture, and it sounds like a lot of fun too. So if I'm going to wrap up, but if people want to find out more about you, more about the show, where can they find you on the web?
Adultingwithjane.com.
I'm going to wrap up. Thanks so much for coming, and thank you all out there for taking this trip down the rabbit hole. For more episodes of this show, you can find them on our website, norestfortheweekendpodcast.com. You can also find us on all the podcast channels, and now we're on footprint.tv, so you can download the app and watch all the episodes on your phone or on your Apple TV or any of the places that you can watch Jenny's show. We're fully integrated, and you can send us money anytime. Just kidding. But that's
Are you, though?
That being said, we do have a Patreon. You can visit us at patreon.com/NoRestOfTheWeekend. Once again, just want to give a quick shout out and say thanks for coming, Jenny.
Thanks
for coming back.
Me.
Anytime you have any other projects, let me know. Come on back. And for Behind the Rabbit Productions, I'm Jason Godbey. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.